Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to yet another edition of OBR Weekly. I'm Barry McBride. I am a non-marsupial as well as the publisher of the OBR, and that right there, that's the legend. Fred Greetham has been covering this team for a couple of years. How you going? How's it going, Fred?
It's going good. You're using big words. What's a marsupial? The only one I know is an opossum.
Yeah. I wrote about a marsupial in my morning bloviation. That's why it's a nod to the bloviation. By the way, if you are just tuning in and you avoid the bloviation like most smart people do, just be aware that tomorrow we are going to have the world debut of the new OBR marketing video presented to you in the bloviation. And so you pretty much have to check out the bloviation, to see the new marketing video. Really good stuff, Fred. I mean, this is fantastic. But we do have something going on. About 3 hours ago, the new league year started. And as a result, we probably should be on the air. Right. Well, it wasn't a happy new year to D'Anthony Bell and some other folks who were not tendered. But it was a happy new year for some people that we're about to talk about who were signed by the Cleveland Browns for large amounts of money. Before we go on, just keep in mind that we love your comments and questions in the chat room. We dedicate the second half of the program to talking through those, and sometimes the first half, if a question comes in that's relevant to our discussion. So please hit us up on the YouTube or chat rooms, and we will mark your comments and jump into them. All right. So, Fred, let's talk a little bit about the news of the week. And this is the news of today. Maliek Collins is now a Cleveland Brown. He's a defensive tackle. He's a big fella, 6'2", 310. He's been around a little bit. He was a third-round pick, but a guy who brings some heft to the middle of that defensive front. Are you happy with him as a potential replacement for Dalvin Tomlinson, or you just think he's sort of a rotational player?
Well, I think it's maybe a slight upgrade, at least when I look at the stats, of Collins. Browns like defensive tackles named Maliek. It's a couple of years ago, both their starting tackles were first name were Maliek. So, yeah, I mean, that honestly to me was the best move they've made. I mean, like a lot of Browns fans, I'm sure, have been quite underwhelmed so far. I mean, free agency was really Myles Garrett getting re-signed, and I'm not downplaying that. A week ago, we spent the whole hour talking about it.
Pretty much.
But since free agency, it's been very underwhelming, to say the least. And I realize there's different things. But Maliek Collins, I mean, when I saw up until that move, of all the moves, they were mostly negative because the Dalvin Tomlinson was more of a negative than anybody they got to replace him.
Right.
I knew they weren't done. But here's a guy who was cast off by the 49ers, and as a salary cap, Browns were able to save money by signing him to a less contract than what Tomlinson. I think, when the contract was done originally, Tomlinson, it was advertised as 4 years, $57 million, but it was really the first 2 years, about $27 million. So that might have been to entice him to sign with the Browns. But I don't think a lot of people thought he would be here more than 2 years. So I think this is a trade-off, but I think he would become a starter right now with Shelby Harris, with Michael Hall and Jawan Briggs as the backup. But I was kind of angling and liking the idea of another guy that was being released by the 49ers, and that was Javon Hargrave. He was quickly snatched up by the Vikings for big money. So this is almost like plan B, I think. But I think it's he had 5 sacks last year. That was more than Tomlinson had.
Right.
Gives you pressure in the inside, take up space and help you in the run game, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting addition, Maliek Collins. As noted, he's got a pretty good pass rush grade, not so much run defense, but they helped themselves in the run defense another way, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But first, let's talk about edge rusher that they signed. A young man who is 6'5", 259, age of 25, Joe Tryon Shoyinka, I believe it is. First time I've tried to say that name out loud. Previously with the Buccaneers, he was a first-round draft pick. He was the last pick in the first round a few years ago. But he has not been exactly what was expected when he was drafted in the first round. He's only got 5 career sacks. He's got a 6% pressure rate, as you see there on the screen. So obviously a guy, this looks like to me, Fred, like one of the guys that Andrew Berry occasionally takes a swing on, an ex-first round pick, a guy who thinks he has potential, could find himself in Cleveland. Maybe we get lucky this time.
Yeah, I think that I've noted that Andrew Berry, obviously they do a lot of work at the combine and drafts, and I think this would have been maybe the first year he was in charge of the draft, but he had been obviously scouting. So a lot of guys they like that they don't get, it seems like they come back when they become, and they go, oh, we were impressed with this guy back when. There's been a lot of free agents since he's been here that have followed that path. I think Carl Joseph was one, a former first-round safety when he became available, and you can go down the list. I mean, Devin Bush, Joe Tryon. I see what you did there. Joy Inc. But, yeah, I mean, I hope they're not counting on him to be the bookend with Myles Garrett, because I don't know if he's going to get more pressure than Isaiah McGuire or Alex Wright or Obo Okoronkwo. A lot of people thought maybe they'd let Okoronkwo go, and they still might. But again, I've always used the idea, if you don't have a better replacement, then I wouldn't just necessarily move on from somebody to move on from somebody. So we'll see. Supposed to be a lot of good edge rushers in the draft. Notably one at number 2. But, there's some, in the second, third, fourth round that they could add. And so they just got to hit on these whatever direction they go. But it looks like a low-risk signing, kind of like what they're doing. Instead of going aggressively at the big-name guys, it seems like that they're just kind of going for the under-the-radar, budget-friendly type guys on short-term contracts, more like a second tier or so.
Right. They're making smart, less expensive, incremental improvements, we hope, based on what we know of these guys. And, they were, unlike many years with the Cleveland Browns, right, Fred, where we were expecting a big signing on the first day, maybe 2 signings on the first day. This group is quite deliberately waiting out the tidal wave of cash that accompanies the start of free agency and going a little bit slower pace and waiting for bargains, it seems like.
Well, they've been pretty aggressive. The first year, he came out of the gate like at 12:01, Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin and John Johnson, and maybe the not the best use of money. And then Juan Thornhill a couple years ago, and he hasn't been great in free agency. Jack Conklin might be the best free agent signing. Have to look at totally in the roster, but yeah, I mean, I think also their cash situation because of the Deshaun Watson situation and Myles Garrett. Frankly, I mean, when you had at the time they signed or traded for Watson, it was the highest paid player in NFL history, and Garrett just became the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And with all that dead cap money, They got to be a little more judicious on things. I'm a little disappointed from the aspect. I asked Andrew Berry the question at the combine, would they be as aggressive, or is there anything they couldn't do to be as aggressive as they were the year they went after Watts? And he said, no, nothing will be cost prohibitive. And it's very early, but it doesn't seem like they went at Sam Darnold. He was, the biggest free agent. We don't know, what they've done, other than sit in the waiting game. So time will tell. I mean, it's all going to come down to the musical chair game of the quarterback situation. So,
yeah.
but yeah, you're taking released guys, even in Collins, and first round pick in Tryon Shoyinka that obviously Tampa didn't want to, kind of like a Jedrick Wills, they could have had a 5th-year option, but let him walk. And so, that's where they're at. We'll see what else they do. Brought back Devin Bush, and they traded their 3rd-string quarterback for probably a 3rd-string quarterback. At least that's what you're hoping.
Right. Well, nice segue. Let's talk about Devin Bush, re-signed with the Browns. And, as much as everyone thinks, okay, here's another first-round draft pick that Andrew Berry took a chance on, who was kind of a bust in Pittsburgh, Bush had a pretty good year last year, in some respects of his game. If you take a look at his PFF run grades, he was, 12th in run defense, 13th in pass rush, pretty good grades there, at least from the PFF perspective. But his pass coverage, not the best. But given that the defensive line is so focused on the pass rush, it's probably a pretty good idea to have a run stopper at linebacker, right, Fred?
Yeah, and with Jordan Hicks, who was a good player, but he was dinged up a lot and missed time. And I think this says more about the JOK situation. I mean, to be frank, they don't play linebackers a lot, and there just is a lot of uncertainty of JOK's status. And he played a lot after JOK got hurt and didn't come back, as well as Diabete. So I haven't heard much about him, but I think it makes sense to bring the guy back again. Unless you have a better option, keep with what you have. And it just shows that you really can't have him out there in passing situations, because you're going to get caught, in bad matchups. But no, I think he took a big step in resurrecting his career. He had kind of, after he got hurt in Pittsburgh, he was the 10th overall pick that year, but he kind of bounced around and kind of making a second go round here. And so hopefully he can, as we've seen with linebackers, and guys, even with the Browns, it seems like they have a propensity to bring back guys on 1-year contracts. I wouldn't be surprised to see if they do that with Maurice Hurst, and, now that they moved on from Tomlinson. So we'll see. But yeah, Bush, I mean, I think that's a good insurance type move, and make sure you have somebody, that can help in the tackling game, because their tackling, as we've noted, was one of the worst in the NFL. And so if you got somebody who can tackle, you might as well keep your hands on them.
Yep. Tackling issues and pre-snap penalties, I think, were the one of the watchwords in 2024, along with quarterback bust. But let's move on. We got an offensive tackle. His name is Cornelius Lucas. He's 33, very tall guy, 6'8", 327. He has been around the league here. He's played with a number of different teams. He's a swing tackle. I mean, he's started about a third of the games, a little bit more than a third of the games that he's played. His PFF grade was 74.1, which is 27th for offensive tackles. And, what's really nice is he only allowed 1 sack in 464 snaps. And whoever is behind center would certainly appreciate that. What do you think about this signing, Fred? Is this another good deal for the Browns, or a good exchange for James Hudson, or just another nomad coming through town?
Well, they've seen so many tackles come and go with injury. I think it's pretty obvious Jedrick Wills and Hudson already has moved on. With Jack Conklin, and I think DeJuan Jones is who they're wanting to be the left tackle. But this gives you great insurance, that Jones is going to have to earn the job, or Lucas can stand in and do it. I think he's an upgrade over, James Hudson for sure. And you might even say with Jedrick Wills. So last couple years with the injuries, they've had guys like Afidi, Garen Christian, and I think this player's a little more of an upgrade, but I think he's a solid player that can play both sides. If you have an injury with Jones or Conklin, we've seen that the tackles have had problems. And Jones, has had trouble staying on the field. He's finished the last 2 years on injury reserve. He has to keep his weight down. This is another big individual. Maybe he can be, he's about the same size in height, but maybe that'll help DeJuan to aspire to be a little more lighter on his feet. And
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's a good move. I mean, again, these are not, when I had my 6 steps to turn the team around, I had tackle or offensive line as kind of like, I felt it was the strongest position. They just needed depth, and their question was at left tackle, and this kind of addresses it. Same way with linebacker and some of the other ones they've addressed. The top needs, other than the Maliek Collins, they haven't got to yet.
Right. Yeah, they in one position that gets a little bit of attention here as being a need is quarterback. So let's talk about what's happening with quarterbacks, Fred. They dealt for Kenny Pickett. He's still young, should be coming into his prime, 26, and was previously with the Steelers, of course, a first-round draft pick who did not meet expectations. Once again, Andrew Berry taking a chance on a player like that. He was with the Eagles last year, so he's a Super Bowl winner. But the other numbers not quite as inspiring. PFF ranking not that great, and he's got 14 interceptions to 15 touchdowns. The one stat I've seen on him that people like to trot out is that he's something like 15-10 as a starter. He's got a winning record as a starter, and there's not too many Cleveland Browns quarterbacks who would say that. What do you think of this pickup, Fred? Are you excited at all for this? Do you think he could potentially turn into a starter, or is this just insurance in case our eventual bridge quarterback gets hurt?
Well, as we've seen here the last 2 years, 5 starting quarterbacks in 23, 4 in 24. It seems like you see them all. I'm not that excited about this guy. If DTR, I felt it was time to move on from him. He has shown that he's just not, I don't think he's the answer at quarterback. I think he's a great athlete. Maybe you could have moved him or tried him at wide receiver or something like that. But as far as quarterbacks, I look at it as a parallel. You're trading your third quarterback for your third quarterback. If they're counting on this guy to be their bridge or stopgap starter, I'm not that excited for sure, because why did we make fun of him when he was with the Steelers? Well, first of all, because he was with the Steelers,
Yes.
But they won those games because their defense. It was just on the quarterback. You were hoping he wouldn't lose the game. So
Exactly.
no, I think Andrew Berry's looking at this. Okay, I trade a 5th-round quarterback for a 1st-round quarterback. They probably had evaluated, maybe not as high as the Steelers, but I bet you they had him up, at least 2nd-round grade, and feel like, this is an upgrade. So I don't know what else they're going to do here, but I have to think it's just kind of a parallel situation. And it also signals to me that they're looking for a different type of quarterback than the DTR. I think when they drafted him, they were expecting to get a guy that maybe could be in the mold of Deshaun Watson, that could be his backup, and eventually, whether he's a long-term backup or, eventually stepped in for him, more of a mobile running type quarterback. And that's not what Pickett is. I think he's more in the what we would call more the traditional offense. So that's also, I think, more the style that they're wanting to, the type of a quarterback that they're going to use.
Yeah, just putting up some comments here. A lot of comments on Pickett. Of course, Browns fans had to go and scrub their Twitter timelines for everything that they said about Kenny Pickett when he was a Steeler. But one of the things that I think I've heard a little bit of buzz about is that Pickett may have been told that he has a chance to compete for a starting job. Let's just hypothesize that this quarterback room turns out to be Cousins, Pickett, and maybe, it's either going to be the first round, the number 2 pick, or shortly thereafter, they'll pick up a Cam Ward or Jackson Dart or someone along those lines. Do you see Kevin Stefanski just having a wide open quarterback competition where a guy like Pickett could really compete? Or do you think it goes to Cousins or Wilson or whoever the aged veteran bridge is?
Well, if it's a Cousins or a Wilson, they're not coming here without some type of, assurances they're the starting quarterback. I mean, if they have choices to go to teams, you're going to have to sell them, not so much on Kenny Pickett, but that you're not going to put them down, when your draft pick, you draft a guy and you put them out. I think ideally we always say this in theory, but you want that guy to sit and learn a little bit and not be thrown out there. The year that I think Baker Mayfield was the most ready quarterback they drafted, and the plan that year, if you remember, was for him to sit on the bench all year. And Tyrod Taylor got hurt in the third game, and then he was in. That was the end of it. But I think the plan is I don't dislike what the Falcons did. They went all in to get Cousins last year. I mean, they paid him $180 million and gave him like $100 million guaranteed. And then they turned around and drafted Michael Penix with the 8th pick. And everybody's like, what? Why are they doing that? Well, we saw what happened. And I don't have a problem. In fact, that's the proponent that I put in my up to date. The last projection is go all in to get a veteran starting quarterback that isn't like necessarily just a bridge guy, somebody that is the undisputed starter day one.
Right.
And then draft a guy if you believe one of those quarterbacks is it at number 2, you take them too. And so be it if they have to sit for a while. The thing the Browns have got in trouble is throw guys out there before they're ready. And we know injuries happen all the time with Browns quarterbacks, and they probably will end up on the field anyway. But we're always worried about, they don't need to take a quarterback now because they got a 38-year-old or they got a 41-year-old or, I don't see it. I say you can't have enough of them. The question is, do they like the quarterbacks at the top? That's what I don't know. And if it's Cam Ward and that's the only one they want, then they really need to see if they can pry him away from the Titans if the Titans aren't sold. But if they don't, if they see Ward, Sanders the same, and they like them both, well, then you're okay. But if you don't think Sanders or whoever isn't picked isn't much different from Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or Tyler Shuck or whoever it might be, then you don't necessarily take them at 2. But I just feel like, man, you have a chance to get a quarterback. You don't take one to take one.
Mm-hmm.
To the point there, if they think they're just like Kenny Pickett, then you don't take them. You got to think they're a difference maker that you have a chance to get and have them on your team. But, there's so much smoke and everything out there. It's hard to even know what anybody thinks. You won't really know till it comes down to it. So,
Right.
but so far they're not giving a lot of assurances with their moves at quarterback. It concerns me a little bit because I'm almost feeling like they're just totally banging on Kirk Cousins being available, and I'm starting to get the idea that he might not even be available.
Yeah, it seems that way. And the Falcons are certainly going to let this play out. If they do intend to get rid of him, they're waiting on a draft pick. They're playing a game of bluff with the league. But I don't think the Browns are going to give him any draft picks. So let's talk about another quarterback whose name is not Kirk Cousins. It's Russell Wilson. He's coming in to visit the Browns tomorrow. Wilson is 36. He's 5'11", 206. Been with the Seahawks, the Broncos, and the Steelers. As I think we all know, he was a third-round pick from the Badgers. His numbers pretty pedestrian last year, but pedestrian might have gotten the Browns into the playoffs. He was 20th out of 75 quarterbacks in PFF rating. He didn't throw many interceptions, which would be a welcome relief after the playoff game in 2023 and Jameis Winston's performance in 2024. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So Russell Wilson ready to visit the Browns. Is he at the top of your quarterback list right now, or is he close to the top of your quarterback list right now, Fred?
Well, he wasn't one of my targets or options because I assumed that he would go back to Steelers. But I don't know. I haven't followed it that closely why everybody wants to move on from him, why the Seahawks wanted to move on so quickly, why the Broncos wanted to move on, and the Steelers. Like you said, it got him to the playoffs. Whenever he's played the Browns, when he was with the Seahawks and even with the Broncos, and he ate the Browns up. He maybe didn't do as much. I don't remember this year with the Steelers, but he is a game manager at this stage of his game. And like you said, the Browns lost more games because they threw 23 interceptions than anything. Their quarterback play lost them games. And I don't know. It's a game of musical chairs now. I feel like right now there's three teams, Titans, Browns, and Giants, and Steelers. I should say four teams looking for quarterbacks, and there's like three established starters available. Mm-hmm. Well, two, really, Wilson and Rodgers. And Cousins, nobody knows. Everybody thinks he'll be available. So I don't know. If this is your choice, the one thing you got Wilson, and you just talked about Pickett. I remember Wilson Pickett had some pretty good hit songs. I mean, Wait Till the Midnight Hour. He was a tremendous singer. So we could always have that going for us if we do the Wilson Pickett deal. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, seriously, he'd probably be the best quarterback that the Browns would have had on the team last year. It's not saying much, but if it comes down to that, I would rather have somebody that knows what they're doing, has been the Pro Bowl, been the Super Bowl, has been a winner. I just don't know what your options are. I mean, I would take him as the starter over the guys that are available on the second tier,
Yeah.
I think he's a better option than Joe Flacco right now. Guys that are left, Mac Jones, Carson Wentz, Gardner Minshew. That's just the fact of the matter. I know it would be crazy to have on your roster Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson, but it's the same thing. These guys, it seems like Wilson and Rodgers are in this camp. Nobody wants them or something, It's like, okay, I looked at Rodgers' stats. He had like 29 touchdowns, 10, 11 interceptions or something,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw there, Wilson's stats. So I don't know. I mean, it's half a dozen or another. You want somebody that can fit in the offense and thrive.
Yeah, a lot of opinions on Russell Wilson in the chat room. And if you're in the chat room right now, please hit us up with questions for the second half of the show. I've got a few marked, but there's room for more. So if there's anything you want to talk about, just hit us up with it, and we will try to get to it. Wilson Pickett is a good call out, Fred, in the midnight hour. Roxy Music did an incredible cover of that. That was my version, the Roxy Music version, but I have no taste, as you know. If you want to bulk yourself up this year, I would suggest looking up our friends at Core Home Fitness, who present this program, who we thank for their support. They make the best dumbbells on the market. The adjustable dumbbells that they make are just unbelievable. Rated Best Buy, as you know, if you ever listen to the program. We talk about it every week. They're rated Best Buy by the New York Times and Men's Health and Consumers Reports. People who rate these things for a living say that these are the awesomest dumbbells you could possibly get. So check out their videos and other products like the Fight Master on corehomefitness.com. You can also find videos and an app there to help you with your workouts. Go check them out for the ultimate in-home fitness equipment. They've stepped up to sponsor the OBR, and they rock. So thank you, Core Home Fitness. All right, so let's get to the questions. Couple on Russ Wilson. First question, Jeffrey Champion. What would Russ Wilson bring to the Browns if we sign him after the meeting? What do you think are the strong attributes of Russell Wilson with the Browns, Fred?
I think settle down, settle the, leadership aspect of things. We talked about last year and just needed adequate average quarterback play. Browns had awful quarterback play for most of the season, and especially the first 7 games, and that led to a 1-6 start, and then the season was off the rails. I can't explain what happened. The Steelers, I thought they were doing all right with Fields. I was surprised they switched back to him when he got healthy. They won like 5 in a row, and then they kind of went off the rails. So I don't know. None of these options are great. Yeah. This is the situation you're in because of the Deshaun Watson situation, but you got to make the most of it. And none of these names inspire me. I mean, Sam Darnold didn't inspire me. I mean, at this time last year, if you'd have said you can get Sam Darnold, I go, yeah, right. He's another retread, and all these guys are like that. So whoever they think is the best option, but right now, I don't even know how hard they're going in any of these options, because if you don't come out of here with a starting quarterback, you're left to start the season with whoever you draft, is what I think. Because, right. I mean, you can get a backup quarterback, but you don't want to start your season necessarily with a backup quarterback, a career backup quarterback, and calling the bridge. You want a legitimate starting quarterback that can step in at least until you feel your quarterback's ready. And I just feel like, okay, if you don't come out of here with much more, then everybody's going to know for sure you're drafting a quarterback, with the number 2 pick. You're going to have no option.
Right. Another comment from Jeffrey. He says, I'd rather have Russ Wilson than Kirk Cousins. To be honest, he only threw 5 interceptions. And to me, that brings up a really good point. I mean, Kirk Cousins obviously struggled at the end of last year. He had the Achilles tear. He played hurt. Some people say it was the system he was in. Some people say it was the injury. Some people say he's washed. But the thing is, with Russell Wilson, don't you know a little bit more about what you're going to get than Kirk Cousins, who's coming off of a year where he obviously struggled, and you don't know if he's lost it or not, Fred?
Yeah. And that's where I know Arthur Smith was more of a running type offense and that with the Steelers, but why are the Steelers so down on him? They could have had him signed, but they were holding out for Fields. And Fields was the guy that they benched. And, that's probably one of the reasons he left. He's saying, oh, I can't trust you guys. You bring in or draft somebody. So I don't really know all the machinations behind it. Why, the Steelers just didn't want to, unless they just didn't want to pay him. And that's what it's going to come down to. He was on a $1.2 million. That's a big difference than if he wants 20 million or whatever, 10 million or whatever he wants will come into play. And that's kind of how it is, I think, with Rodgers or any of them. The thing about Cousins, it's 1.2 million because the Falcons, that's the Steelers situation, that they have to eat it all. And that's really why I think they're thinking about, well, we end up paying the $10 million bonus. We got a backup quarterback for $10 million because we have to pay it. If we cut him, he goes somewhere, we have to pay wherever he goes anyway. So
right.
I think that's part of their thinking.
A couple more questions about Wilson. One from our buddy Fumble. He says, are we using Wilson or is he using us? I think that, again, that's a good point. The Browns might be using Wilson to make it appear to Kirk Cousins like there's alternatives, or the Falcons that there's alternatives to Cousins. And Wilson might be using us to sort of get his price up a little bit if he can, sort of indicate that there's some demand for his services. So I sort of think it's both. What do you think, Fred?
Oh, at this point, yeah. I mean, I think I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I don't know if the Browns went after anybody. I haven't heard them linked to any quarterback. Like the Browns were talking to this guy. When you're seeing it, like, even with Fields, it's either the Steelers or the Giants or the Jets, and and Rodgers either going to go the Steelers. You're not hearing anything, so that's like, okay, the agent's not really saying the Browns are involved in this. So, to answer that question, no, that was a 1-year thing, and he would be, he's a free agent. So,
right.
As far as, I really don't get excited about any of these. You could probably sell me on any of a number of these. But you might as well, maybe you should just get Flacco and Rodgers and call it the 40-40 club, and make history there, and then draft a 21-year-old rookie, that'd be fun quarterback room. What do you think? I mean, who would you want to get out of these remaining suspects?
Oh, I don't know. I still think Kirk Cousins has it, but it's so risky, Now, if I'm Andrew Berry and my job is on the line, and Kevin Stefanski, my job is on the line, or, we think it is, I would be a little bit risk averse right now. And to me, Cousins and Rodgers are both throwing the dice. Cousins, because you couldn't read what he did last year. You don't know how to interpret it. Maybe you work him out and you get some confidence in his ability. And then Rodgers is such a, distraction, let's put it that way, for the coaching staff. I wouldn't want him here either. So I'd probably go the safe route, Fred, to be honest with you. I'm thinking about Brown's strategy, and I'm thinking get a guy who's not going to kill you with interceptions and Wilson. Now, Josh Sola in our chat is saying that he missed a ton of reads, and that can kill you in other ways. But, just wait in that number 2 spot, see who's there, Ward or Carter. And if it's Carter, then trade up in the first round and get a Jackson Dart or somebody else you like, or Sanders if he falls far enough. I think that's my strategy. But, again, I'm not paid a large amount of dollars for my expertise in these matters. So,
well, the reason I've been on Cousins all along, assuming he's available, is because he thrived with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota. He would be coming to that offense that he thrived in. Atlanta did not run that type of offense with him. And I kind of go with the report. When he got hurt, he hurt his shoulder. In those last 5 games or whatever, he threw 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions.
Right.
Before that, he had 17 touchdowns and 7 interceptions and was playing pretty well. They were 6-3. He said he played through the injury with the shoulder and that. And so I kind of believe that because it was a fall off. If you look at his final stats, it's like 18 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, but he's still ranked like 20th in the NFL in passing rating. And so that's what I'm thinking, is that the injury did play into it, not the Achilles. That's what I was assuming to begin with, more so the shoulder. So I think you get him back in this system and get the running game going again, and you have that build up where he can thrive in the play action pass. That's what Joe Flacco did. We saw he didn't do so much with the Colts. I think you put a quarterback in that system with a great running game, I think you can, get something out of it. I think he can manage the game and not ruin games for you like we saw. So that's why I've kind of leaned on Cousins, I think, more so than a Wilson or some of the other guys that are even mentioned.
Right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we had on Russell Wilson. Ty Sox asked if Cousins on the minimum deal would be the least risk. Yeah, well,
$1.2 million. I mean, that's why the Steelers, the Broncos paid, I don't know how many million to make him go away. And that's why it was such a easy situation for the Steelers. 1.2 million is like minimum you got to pay, and they pay the rest. And it'd be the same thing with Atlanta, is Cleveland or whoever would pay 1.2 million, and the Falcons have to pay the rest. And so I think that's partly what's going in their thinking, saying if Michael Penix got hurt, we would have Kirk Cousins, and we paid for it anyway. So it costs us an extra 10 million for that bonus, because we have to pay everything but the 1.2 million if we trade him or release him, as I understand it.
All right. Well, that's it for the quarterback room. Other than Sancho Bermuda saying, would we lose the locker room before week 1 if we have no good quarterback? Do you think that that's a possibility, Fred, that, Cousins falls through, Rodgers signs somewhere else, Wilson isn't interested in being a Brown, and we're bringing in Jameis Winston again? Do you think that causes trouble for Stefanski right off the bat?
Well, I don't, the locker rooms, even when the Browns were 0-16 before the year, they're excited about the new year and so forth. I don't know about losing the locker room. I mean, it's not like you're gonna get, a high school player. I mean, at worst you're gonna have Joe Flacco or I still think they'll probably get, one of these guys. There's 10. I'm just saying they're not a sure shot, and I'm saying they're in this reason because Deshaun Watson. That's the bottom line, and they're trying to get out of it, and it looks like a way out of it could have been the draft, and there's no sure shot guy at number 2 because you're stuck there because you were tied with the Titans, and they win a tiebreaker. I mean, they used to do a coin flip or something. Now they just gave it to them, but you're sitting at 2, and it's seeming like there's one quarterback. And so you're going to be left at the altar again unless you go get that guy or you can pull something out of the hat. I just don't know if you have time to develop anybody if you don't get a starting veteran quarterback. I don't think anybody wants to see Joe Flacco start for 2 years or a year and a half, or unless you're ready to throw the rookie right out there and go through those growing pains with somebody, from day one. So It's really just nobody knows, and nobody knows what's the best answer until it happens. I don't
Right.
think anybody thought Jaden Daniels was going to do what he did last year. Everybody thought, well, Caleb Williams was the no question number one pick.
Right.
At least I don't remember all the talk about Williams and then or Daniels, and then he took off. So, that could happen. Maybe Ward's you get him at 2, or maybe you get Sanders and he's ready to go from day one. So I don't know.
All right. Let's go on to some other questions here. One from Crash Override 330 says, ask for your opinion on Will Howard if he's available in the later rounds of the draft, which I assume he would be after that combine performance. But you like what you saw out of Will Howard? He certainly had some good receivers to throw to.
Yeah, I mean, that playoff run was, I was like a lot of people watching after that Michigan game thinking, man, could have stayed with Kyle McCord and had the same thing. But he stepped up in that playoff run, very impressive. I don't know how close he is to being ready, but he's got the size. I like his demeanor. I talked to him at the combine. Listen, I'm not opposed with 10 picks to take 2 quarterbacks this year. If you take one at 2, take another one in the 4th, 5th round or something like that you like. If you like,
Right.
Kevin Stefanski said at the combine that he really liked a lot of these quarterbacks. Now, he didn't give names, but he gave the impression there's more than one. We'll see if that's the case. Is if Cam Ward goes number 1 and they pass on a quarterback at 2, then that's telling me they didn't like him that much,
Right.
But Will Howard, yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the top 5, in the draft. I don't know how quick he is, but I'm just not for just drafting somebody, not getting the best quarterback you think that's out there in this draft, because you're just relying and hoping the guy develops. Usually statistics, I think last year the final 8 teams in the playoffs, 7 of them were first-round draft picks, and a lot of them was the number 1 pick or at least top 10 picks. I think
Right.
the only one that wasn't was Jalen Hurts. He was second round, and he was
Right.
the MVP. But I just think it's a long shot to take a guy and say, yeah, he'll develop, and we got this guy in the 5th round or 3rd round, or for
Right.
every one guy that you can remember that came from there, you can name thousands that you never heard of. They were busts, so there's a lot of luck involved. I think your odds go up the higher you pick a guy. You just got to get it right, and you got to do everything to build around it. And that's what it seems to me the Titans are doing. They're getting weapons, they're getting offensive linemen, so it feels like they're loading. They signed Kevin Zeitler today. Okay, they're loading up to get a rookie quarterback to start,
Yeah.
probably Cam Ward. So that's unfortunate if he is who the Browns, the only one they think is ready to go or worthy of the 2nd pick. But
Right.
who
But your
knows?
consolation
Well,
prize at the 2nd spot in the draft is not too bad if you're looking at Abdul Carter or, one of these sort of guys on the defensive side that could, come in and make an impact right away. Jeff W. says, different question. Is it interesting that no one wants to sign Chubb, or you don't hear of any interest in him at all? I'm not sure it's necessarily true. I've heard buzz, it may just be put out there by the agent to drive up price, but buzz about the Steelers, for example, having an interest in Nick Chubb. But he's out there and available and has not signed to this point, 4 hours into, the official start of free agency. But follow-up question from Teddy. He says, do you think Chubb is still likely to come back?
Well, in our front page today, I wrote a story about Nick Chubb coming back. I do think he's coming back. I know there's a lot of sentiment. Browns have had a bad PR offseason. They got a little bit back with Myles Garrett re-signing, and it cost them, though, pretty much their free agency. They went all in to kind of turn that narrative around. There was a reason they did it Sunday, the day before free agency, because
Right.
he had told everybody this team's no good. I want out, da, 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 da. You're trying to get some free agents here. And, your best player says, I don't want to stay here. They can't win. And then all of a sudden it's not about the money until it is about the money. And he signs the biggest deal ever. I don't think that was the driving force, but I think he got bad advice to do what he did and, trashing the Browns. Anyway, I think it would do a lot of good. Nick Chubb coming off major knee surgery. Usually, every doctor I've talked to coming back from this, especially to play football, it's the second year that you're much better and more like yourself if you're ever back to yourself. The first year, you could see him getting a little better each week, I thought. But he ended the year 3.3 yards a carry. He had one run of 18 yards, one run of 15. Nothing like Nick Chubb. His career average was 5.3. He ended at 3.3. Unfortunately, he got hurt with the foot and didn't get to finish the year. I think he would have kept getting better. With that said, there's something that I was made aware of, I think in our insiders, that the NFL Player Association, the owners come together because there's so many older players getting cut because of their salaries. And they came up with a plan where you could retain a player and it wouldn't count maybe as much against your salary cap. I don't know how that all works, but as I understand, he had to become a free agent, which he did today. And the Browns could make a qualifying offer to him. And I think it was something like $3 million, but would only cost half on the salary cap. So if you could offer him at $3 million that he received, but it only counted $1.5 million on the cap, well, that's kind of a very no-brain type of a situation. I looked up last year with incentives and everything. He ended up earning about $3.5 million, and that was pretty generous of the Browns, coming off that major injury. And he has said, he's told me, he's told numerous, he wants to end his career with the Browns. He doesn't like change. He doesn't like going to unfamiliar settings. And this was at Greenbrier a couple of years ago before he was hurt, when the talk was about he was going into the contract year and all the running backs were getting devalued before the Saquon Barkley and all that last year. But anyway, to answer the question, I think he will. I make the case that you can't count on him being the Nick Chubb of old at 5.3 yards a carry. But you can't rule that out. You know what, Jerome Ford, he can carry the load, but I don't know if he's, really a big-time back. But I think in this draft, you can draft a big-time back. You might not get Ashton Jeanty or a Mario Hampton, but I think you could get Travion Henderson, Judkins, Sampson. There's about 10 of them. And they're not all going to go in the second round. So you could get some of them guys in the third, fourth round. I get the best one you could, put him in there with Ford and Chubb, and that's a real good room. If Chubb is back to anywhere that he was close to, you got a tremendous room. And then you have promise for the future, that you have an up-and-coming star running back that you went out and got. And that's just how I see it. If Chubb isn't ready and he doesn't really have a great year, last year he had 300 yards and he moved into third place, all time. He only needs 400 yards to pass Leroy Kelly. Leroy Kelly and Jim Brown are in the Hall of Fame. He would be second if he just had 400 yards. To me, that would be a big achievement. He'd be able to finish his career with the Browns.
Yep.
But I think he can. Let me put it another. Why would you let him go for a couple million to the Steelers and he becomes Derrick Henry over there? Or like Saquon Barkley. Do you think there's any chance Nick Chubb can get back to what he was? I do, in this second year away. I know how hard he works, and I saw him getting better all the time. So I just think he'll be back. I know a lot wrote end of the era when Barry said free agency and stuff. Well, I didn't even pay attention to that because
Yeah.
somebody's got to be interested in him, and he's coming off a lot of questions. How could anybody go make a big commitment to him with the injury situation?
No, it's just not.
And I
It's
also
not
think they
wise.
said, go get an offer and let us match it. Would you let us match any offer you get?
Mm,
And I'm sure that he said, yeah. So at least
right.
I would think he does. So somebody
Yeah.
would have to give him a lot of guaranteed money and blow it away. And I don't think that's going to happen, or you would have heard it in the tampering period. I haven't heard any discussion.
Right. General Gestalt question from chat username, just asking about your confidence level of so far. He sees another year of mayhem. Boy, I hope not. Fred, we could use a winning football team. What's your confidence level so far based on what you've seen in free agency?
They got to get the quarterback going. I still
Mm-hmm.
think if you'd had, I don't know about Russell Wilson, but if last year he would have played like he did here, they probably would have won 6, 7 games, 8 games. They wouldn't have been a disaster. I don't think they're as bad as 3-14. There's too many good players on this team. I don't think they're as good maybe as the 11-6. But I think the defense, that's why I'm a little disappointed they haven't made any moves, because I feel like you could get that defense back in the top 10, top 5, even near the top overall, if you can just, upgrade a couple positions,
Mm-hmm.
and so you got Garrett back. Obviously, Abdul Carter would be a big difference, but then you don't have a quarterback,
Right.
unless that's why I thought it was so big to get a free agent or a trade to get a quarterback, I threw out Geno Smith, and everybody said he wasn't available, and then the Raiders traded for him.
Right.
Derek Carr, he ended up not being available. But I don't know how hard they explored some of that stuff. But if they put all their eggs in the basket of Kirk Cousins and they end up not getting him and settling for one of the non-starting quarterbacks, then that's on them. But I'm willing to give a little more time here to see how it all turns out. But I don't
Right.
think mayhem. I mean, I think they're better than what they did. I think last year they checked out after a 1-6 start. I mean,
Yeah.
believe me, look at the stats when a team starts 1-6. You'd have no chance to make the playoffs. Nobody ever. So they knew that. It's over. The players checked out and the defense started going down. The defense played well enough to win 2 or 3 more games in that 1-6 start. So
Right.
you
If you
got to
got
get the
any
quarterback.
play
You
at
got to
all.
get a quarterback that won't ruin the game, and maybe Wilson, at least can do that.
Right. Well, Fumble thinks they've saved money at defensive tackle and gotten a swing tackle, signed your all-world DE. Pretty good offseason so far from his perspective. So that's another look at it. So differing opinions out there in the chat room. Also, Fumble wants to know, Fred, if you put in your request to Andrew Berry that he trade the 7th rounder so you don't have to hang around all day Saturday of the draft. We're going to be doing a live draft show, man, and that 6th, 7th round can be brutal if you're at the bottom of that 7th round because you're just exhausted after a whole day on Saturday. But
Yeah, that
any
7th
requests,
round,
Andrew?
that 7th round compensatory draft, that's not Mr. Irrelevant,
No,
but it's
we don't
close.
have Mr. Irrelevant this year.
But oh yeah, I mean, we always in the media room want them to trade package your 7th and 6th and all of them and move up, in the 2nd or 3rd round, get all
Right,
them
exactly.
out of the way. But they look at them as trade chips for stuff like that. That's why they're always acquiring them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll have some help that day to handle those.
Yes, you will if the Browns are able to find room for a second OBR reporter. We're going to get somebody else in there to give you a hand on day 3 of the draft. Just a couple quick questions before we leave the air here. One of them from Fumble 13 is, do you think you see Newsome getting traded? Haven't heard any buzz about that, really.
Yeah, I think you're probably just going to play in the 5th-year option. I mean, you're going to have to end up probably paying, like you did with Mayfield. I don't think it's $13 million that somebody's going to take on a $13 million contract. And, he's playing for his future. But I think, if they can trade him on the draft day or between now and the draft, but you got to, again, I haven't seen enough out of Mitchell or Harden, to know if they can step in there. Again, I felt like cornerback Newsome and Emerson dropped off. I would have liked to seen him go get a frontline cornerback in free agency. And then maybe you could trade one of these guys. But right now they're your starters. So unless you have something better, now if you end up drafting Travis Hunter, okay, well, there's one of your cornerbacks, I assume, that could play in the rotation, even if he's playing more at wide receiver. But a lot of moving parts, and I don't think the Browns are in a position to eat a big salary. They might as well keep him on the team.
Yeah. I think especially with the challenges Martin Emerson had last year, it makes sense to keep Newsome around. But rumors out there that obviously that, they're interested in dealing him for a draft pick if somebody was to offer. Just one last thing before we go. Sancho Bermuda put in this little post. He said, credit to Haslam for trying with the big money. The Browns would spend more cash than any other team in the NFL on their roster. And Haslam does that, and I don't think it's a lot of credit for it. But I wanted to use this to bring up, the situation with Haslam and Myles Garrett that happened last week. Haslam came under a tremendous amount of criticism for not talking to Garrett. He was victimized on the big radio shows and stuff like that. But it turns out, I guess in my opinion, that was the right call, Fred, that he shouldn't undermine Andrew Berry. He shouldn't put himself in the spotlight. As business as usual with Andrew Berry in charge. And I got to give Haslam a thumbs up for that one. I don't know what your take is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the chain of command. He hired Andrew Berry to handle those things. If Garrett tries to get the sympathetic ear with the owner, and the next thing they cave into the command or to the demand, then that's all we hear is how much Haslam is meddled. He did a lot of that in the early part. Very impatient. Fired guys after 1 year, going and get new guys before they had people lined up. He's trying to make this work. He's given Barry the chance over and over to bail himself out of mistakes by paying these cashes. I mean, like I said, like Jack Duffin's pointed out, he pays more money out than any other team because of the bonuses, and that's what's allowed him to do some of this. So, I think I'd like to have him involved, at least his bankroll, to help the Indians or Guardians, add some players. But
no kidding.
With a salary cap, he's like the Yankees in the NFL. He buys his way. He throws money at a lot of things. It's not always right, but you can't call him being cheap. He's trying to get it right. He's trying to win.
Well, I agree. And I've criticized him a lot in my bloviations. I'm skeptical about a lot that we're hearing about the stadium deal and things like that, but you got to give him credit where it's due. And I think that, like I said, I think he gets some thumbs up from me on how he handled that. Thank you, Sancho, for appreciating the show and being a regular here in the chat room. And thank you, everyone, for attending tonight, hanging out with us. We had a huge audience tonight. It was fantastic. And thank you, of course, Fred.
Thank you
for your wisdom. So we will be back next week. Hopefully we'll have more of this quarterback situation straightened out for this year, but we'll be back to talk about it next Wednesday night at 7:00 on OBR Weekly presented by Core Home Fitness. Thanks for watching. Good night.
See ya. Thank you.